Okay. And then actually, PubMed, does it allow you to record on your local computer too, just in case? Or not? If it doesn't, that's fine.
No, it goes into the same recording.
All right. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is our first official workshop for Fair Forward. So this one is specifically going to be around open source data and career trajectory. So welcome everybody. Let's get started. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Excellent. So just as a reminder, this is part one of a whole series. So we did our informational webinar already. And you can see the slides there, and I think we're aiming to also get the video recording up. And we've got some upcoming workshops. Obviously, you're in the one on open source, but we're also doing some introduction to coding workshops in R, September 8th and 10th. We've got the basics of version control, September 24th, and then we've got our visualization in R on October 10th. And then we've got our hackathon, which is sort of the culmination of all of these things on November 1st and 2nd. If you did not realize this was part of a series, please go ahead and check it out. And you can register for any one of the things you're interested in by going to the registration for the hackathon. And you can just register for the workshops. You don't necessarily have to participate in the hackathon if you just want to collect some skills. All right, next slide. All right, so for today, we're gonna have a couple of fun icebreakers, or at least I hope they're fun. And then we'll intro the team and the workshop. We're gonna talk a little bit about data and where it comes from. We're also going to cover sort of what open source data is and how that's defined. We're also going to go over a little bit on the concepts of fair and care as they sort of pertain to data. And then we'll talk about career paths in data science. Next slide, please. All right, so our first icebreaker is more of a silly one, and it's, would you rather be a hippo-sized hamster or a hamster-sized hippo? So basically a really gigantic hamster or a very tiny, tiny hippo. If you'd rather be a hippo-sized hamster, use the mouse/hamster emoji. And if you really want to be a hamster-sized hippo, use the hippo emoji. Oh, we got a lot of winners for hamster-sized hippo.
Hamster-sized hippo so far.
Okay. Okay, we got a couple hippo-sized hamsters too. All right, excellent. I would rather be a hippo-sized hamster, but that's partially because I watched way too much Godzilla as a child growing up. So I just think of this like very gigantic hamster that should be cute, but it's like terrifying and large.
Yeah. I think I'd be a hamster-sized hippo because I envy the lifestyle of a hippo a lot. I just want to be in the water and kind of peer with my eyes out. For the most part, that's all I want to do.
Fantastic. Anybody else want to share their choice? All right. Awesome. So we've got a hopefully more practical icebreaker as well. We'd love to hear what field you are either currently working in, or if you're still a student, like sort of what field you're working toward. And you can stick that in the chat. All right, we got lots of different folks in different fields, so that's really awesome to see. And that's partially because, you know, sort of data and science and the idea of looking at data is everywhere. So it kind of applies to a lot of different things, which we'll talk about more in our career section. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to who we are. So I am Dr. Alyssa Dillman, and basically I used to work at NIH for a really long time doing bioinformatics and data science training and engagement. And then 3 years ago, I quit to start my own company. And I have been doing a lot of data science training, engagement, and consulting. And my passion is really working with low resource schools to get more technology and technical training and just like STEM engagement in general, because that's my passion. Padma, kicking it off to you.
I'm Padma. I have worked in public health and math, specifically very interested in reducing a lot of barriers in accessing healthcare and doing the computational side of it. So I've worked in prediction, modeling, and also building apps for a neuroscience team. And I do have a background in training in math and public health, and I love coffee quite a bit. Cool. Heading it back to you.
So that's us, and that's why we're here and why we're excited. But we also want to sort of, talk a little bit about what the heck this program is. So we created this program, Fair Forward, and the idea is to give, hands-on experience that will really hopefully engage you all in analyzing open source scientific and healthcare data by giving you a bunch of tools and techniques and a community that will help build those skills. And the idea is like really about sort of addressing problems that are of interest to you, your field, your community, and the things that you care about. And as part of the grant we received, we're specifically prioritizing BIPOC students from HBCUs, HSIs, CSUs, and MSIs as in our first recruitment wave, and then professionals as well. And then we'll have kind of a nice cohort of both working professionals and students so they can, network and learn from each other. But yeah, so we'll have open source data science learning materials. We've got these 5 prep workshops and then the virtual hackathon to kind of culminate the skills building and also the sort of networking and working with each other. Next slide. All right, so as I mentioned, we are funded from ORCA, which is a program that's specifically focused on open science. So why does open science matter? So it really sort of has these 3, and in my opinion, has these 3 overarching ideas. And the first being, it really brings diverse voices and perspectives into research. Open science is really about trying to make things much more open, transparent, usable, so that way more people can look at the resources and actually use them for the things that matter to them and approach those with fresh eyes, with new eyes, with different approaches. And the idea being that open science will improve accessibility and usability of research. So hopefully it's actually more usable and accessible and findable to everybody. And then also to increase the visibility of research, right? If all we do is publish our research in a paper somewhere that's behind a paywall that nobody can actually access, that doesn't really help the public good. So really making sure that the work that is being done is not just sort of like accessible, that it's visible, that the things that are being done in research are things of interest to the general population. So open science is really this culmination of community-driven, informed, and data-driven research impacts and policies. Next slide. So open science comes in lots of different flavors because it kind of gets applied to lots of different spheres. So open science can encompass things like open methodologies, open peer review, open resources, open access, open data, open source. Padma and I are particularly going to be focused on the open source and open data just because that's where our backgrounds are from. So open source is mostly focused on the software and technology that's being utilized to analyze data, and then the data itself being accessible results and raw data as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about those two things because they're sort of the things that we're very familiar with and are nearest and dearest to our hearts. Padma, on to you.
Great. So I will be talking a little bit about what is really data and where does it come from. And you'll be surprised to find out that data is actually all around us. So some types of data are text. So these could be names, numbers, which could be the number of times you went to the playground last month, or the number of times you went to the grocery store. It could be images, it could be scans of brains, it could be survey data. For example, the form that we made you fill to come to this workshop. It could also be dates like your birthday, addresses, your residential address, your school address. It could also be videos. Videos that you take of your friends are also considered data. Or it could be times that occurred during an experiment. So some sources of data also include newspapers for text, receipts for numbers, also includes the money you spent on things. Images that come from social media is also a type of data. Surveys are often found in research studies, and you also have dates in social media when your images and your videos are tracked. You also have addresses in health records and videos and interviews that you take of people, as well as experiments that collect times. This brings me into what really is open source data. Alyssa mentioned a lot about using open source data, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what it actually entails. So open source data is any data that is freely accessible with very little or no restrictions on using it, modifying it, or distributing it. So accessible essentially means that it's available to anyone, regardless of affiliation, a lot of words. Integration friendly, which means how easily can you bring it into your own workflow and into your own analysis and your studies. Is it transparent? Are there very clear origins and ways in which the data is being built and collected? And is there trust and consistency in your data? Open source data also does not have any governance barriers or minimal governance barriers. A lot of struggles and difficulties in obtaining data comes from having to do a lot of data sharing agreements and knowing how to request it and having a lot of approval processes in place. Open source also means that it's well documented. Do we know all the data quality issues that have existed before? Do we know how they were collected? Do we know what kind of challenges they faced when they were collecting it? And it's also community driven. There is continuous and constant improvement from people that use the data and people who want to use the data, and also how they can improve in future iterations of collecting the data. So these are some examples of open source data. We also have it in document form, and I can drop it in the chat for all of you to have. Hopefully that pasted right. But we broadly categorize this into three different sectors, but Harvard Dataverse, Stanford Archive, Open Science Framework, Figshare all talk about experimental results, survey data, any computational models, if you're looking at scientific measures or health outcomes. You can also use CERN, NIH, or CDC data to look at physics experiments or medical research or public health studies, clinical trials, or any surveillance data that you're interested in. The US Census, Department of Education, and the Institute of Education Sciences, known as IES, also collects demographic data. How many people are going to public schools? What are the sort of metrics and assessment scores that the kids are receiving in these schools, as well as policy research. And curated analysts of curated data sets are on Tidy Tuesday, 538, or Walden Data. These usually have cleaned practice data sets if you ever want to go in and play around with data and have fun with doing some projects. And you can also look at geospatial mapping data through OpenStreetMap and look at business registrations, mapping data, what kind of corporate structures exist in your neighborhood. So these are just a couple examples, and the link to the document that I dropped also lets you go in and access all of these. Which brings me to all of what is formally versus formally collected data versus uncollected data. So we have talked a lot about census forms and surveys and data that more explicitly exists. But you also have passively collected data like social media when you post a story on Instagram or when you tag a specific cafe or a restaurant that you go to eat, that is still data. And you also have uncollected but available data like community knowledge, how people in your neighborhood know local secrets and hidden spots and insights into where you live. So these are just a couple of examples. And I'll hand it over to Alyssa to talk a little bit about how we can keep open source data community focused as well as fair. Alyssa, you're muted.
All right, whoever had that in their bingo card, you win. I've only been Zooming for forever and still can't remember. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the concepts of FAIR and CARE, particularly because FAIR is something that I worked with a lot in my office at NIH. Next slide. All right, so FAIR is actually an acronym that stands for Findable, Accessible, Interoperable, and Reusable. And the idea is that this is really meant to be a framework to enhance data visibility, availability, compatibility, and utility for effective sharing and reuse of data in research and beyond. And I really do want to emphasize the beyond part, partially because, a lot of the times when data is first collected, there's sort of a very specific idea in mind. But there's like so much more that can be elucidated from that study, so many other ways that that data can be explored, but it can only be explored if it is FAIR data. All right, next slide. So for findable, it means that the data and metadata, so metadata is information about the data, should be easy to find for both humans and computers. And the reason being, obviously for humans, we're the ones taking the first pass at it, and we want to see if it has things that we're interested in. So it needs to be readable by us, but also it needs to be computer readable if we want to, scrape it, build models on it, and do other things that might be more complicated. So as I mentioned, that metadata component or data about the data, information about the data, should be assigned a globally unique and persistent identifier. So what that means is basically like there's a unique tag for the information about your data, and that the data should be described with rich metadata. So what that means is, as much as you can tell about that data, like how it was collected, the information about who was collected with, if it's survey data, what the demographics are behind that data, how the data was generated, which tools were used to generate that data, it has metadata. So lots of information about sort of, how that data was collected and what it means. And then that the metadata is clearly and explicitly included in the identifier of the data described. And then finally, metadata are, should be registered or indexed in some sort of searchable resource, because oftentimes the information we're looking for to see if data is useful to like our question is in the metadata, not necessarily in the data itself. So it's not just the data that has to be findable, it's that metadata that's often the thing of like, oh, this data has been collected the same way that I collected my data. That's great. I can use this data and I can merge these together, but that's in the metadata, not the data. So it's really important that both are findable. Next slide. Then we have accessible. So obviously, okay, you found the data. The data should be retrievable using standard protocols that are open, free, and universally implemented. If you've got to go around and do some really complicated key system and all this, and you need a specific piece of software or a specific piece of hardware, that's going to be really hard for most people to be able to utilize. So not just the data, but metadata, both data and metadata should be retrievable by their identifier, so that unique ID for both the data and the metadata. The protocol itself to like retrieve that information should be free and open, and like I said, universally implementable. So like basically, you should be able to just like click download or something very straightforward. The protocol should also allow for authentication and authorization procedure if and when necessary. And then finally, metadata should be accessible even when the data are no longer available, because oftentimes, like I said, that metadata has a lot of information about how the data was processed, collected. So that metadata in and of itself is super important. And even if the data are no longer available or have moved to something that's much less accessible, it's still really impactful and useful to know that that data was generated at some point in time. Next slide. Then you have interoperable. So hopefully your data is in these standardized formats and structures, languages and vocabularies that enable integration with other data and tools. So the idea is that your data and your metadata use some sort of formalized, accessible, shared, and broadly applicable language for knowledge representation. Usually this is unique to like each field. Each field kind of has their sort of standards. And that, you know, we want to conform to that, so that way that kind of data is sort of able to be used together. This gets a little tricky when you move outside of fields, because often, like I said, each field kind of has their standards that they use. And so what happens is, if you ever want to do some really cool cross-field study, it can be really difficult to interoperate because these standardizations are different, which makes it really hard to ask these really interesting cross-cutting questions. So, you know, if you really want your data to be fair, it should really be accessible broadly. And so that way it can be used together. Data and metadata vocabularies should follow the FAIR principles. And that will, you know, help with this interoperability or the ability to combine multiple data sets. And then data and metadata should include some qualified reference to other metadata. Again, because the idea is interoperability is like, can I use this data with other data? So if this data and metadata already references other data and metadata, it means it is already like got that 1 degree of connection, and means that it's at least like interoperable with one other data set, which means like other data sets of that type may also be interoperable. All right, next slide. Then finally, we get to the sort of the crux of it, which is reusability. So data should be well described to allow replication and or combination in different contexts by different users. So the data and metadata should be richly described and accurate, and have all of the relevant attributes needed to be able to recapitulate whatever study was originally done. Metadata and data should also be released with clear and accessible data usage licenses, right? So if you publish data, but you don't bother to tell anybody how they can reuse it, they may not use it at all, or may not know how to appropriately use it. So just releasing it into the wild is not enough. You have to kind of say like, hey, like you can use this data in this way, you know, in these with these specific licenses. And then data and metadata should be associated with detailed provenance. And then finally, data and metadata should meet domain relevant community standards. All right. And then I also just want to mention, so there's definitely this idea of FAIR, you know, being findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, but that also should be taken in conjunction with the CARE principles. So the CARE principles originally sort of originated from Indigenous data governance, and the idea behind that is, you know, Indigenous data is data that should be owned by the folks that generate the data. So there's sort of rules or guidance, these CARE principles around handling data governance. So it's for data for collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And it's, again, kind of meant to make sure that we're using data in ethical and responsible ways. I know that's a lot, like it's sort of a whirlwind of a lot of things and a lot of jargon. So I really loved this example that I came across called TADA, which is sort of these simple guidelines to improve code sharing. And so you've got the T, which is transferable, and basically, you know, anyone can open the file, view the code, run the script without needing to convert the file or alter the code. And that, you know, includes things like interoperable file formats and file paths. The A is for accessibility, right? Anybody can find and access the data, which we've already kind of talked about that concept. D is documented, so accurate, detailed metadata files that are described in code and its usage. And then A is annotation, so comments within the code that explain what it does, why, and what procedures. So these are sort of like, specifically more for like code, but I do feel like this is kind of a great summary of sort of these concepts in a lot of ways, but like for a specific purpose, which is code. And I will say, oftentimes the code part is the hardest part, because with code, there's so many ways to a potential solution. There's so many ways that you can code doing a simple thing, that, it can be obvious why you chose a particular, way to do that code. That may not make sense for others, but also, yes, there's a lot of different versions of the software that comes with things like R and Python. So it can be really difficult to, right? Like, okay, well, I shared my code, right? But there are particular tools you need to run that code, and you didn't tell me what version those tools are. So Tada is meant to kind of help, hopefully, with some of that. All right, next slide. So that is sort of all about the data and sort of like the things we need to think about when we are, talking about open data. But at the end of the day, we want to ingest this data in some way, shape, or form, and do something with it. And that brings me to sort of the concept of open source software. So I do, I'm in the research realm, so I'm usually focused on sort of the scientific open source software. But I wanted to show this really great visualization that actually Jonah Duckles put on LinkedIn that I thought was just really amazing, because I think the idea here is I really want to highlight for you that you may actually already be utilizing open source software at school or in some projects that you're interested in, or have just sort of like, brushed up against the open source community, because all of these different programs that create, software, all of these different programs that create, whether it's sort of like research software, might be education software, right? Like the carpentries, could be policy and things around policy. So the realm of like open source software is incredibly large and impacts sort of so many different spaces. And so I just wanted to kind of, again, highlight the fact that you may already have interacted in some way, shape, or form with open software. All right. I think it's back to you, Padma.
So now we'll pivot over to talk a little bit about careers and different ways you can apply skills that we just talked about in data science. So again, non-exhaustive list, but a very re-emerging theme of a set of applied skills specifically to data jobs includes statistical analysis. So this often is statistical tests, knowing how much your sample size needs to be in an experiment or how long you need to run the experiment. Data visualization is usually evaluation and reporting, and what I like to think of as like effective storytelling and taking really complex numbers and spreadsheets and putting it in more digestible bits and stories for non-technical audience to understand. Data wrangling usually includes reshaping your data meant for research and policies and making it in a way that is more understandable for other people to then take and report themselves. Data cleaning is when you take raw data and make it ready for then wrangling and visualization. So it essentially goes in a sequential step. Database management, which a very popular tool to do it is SQL or spelled SQL, is meant to make sure your data is consistent. Is your formatting right? Are your character variables all characters in your data? And making sure that when you bring in a data set into your system and your analysis, it stays consistent and regular. Machine learning is used for prediction modeling and to predict health outcomes. predict treatment effects. And accounting involves classifying and regulating data and usually used hand in hand with economic or financial data. So moving into a little bit about different fields of careers. First, we have healthcare, which usually involves statistical analysis, visualization, wrangling, and cleaning. So careers in this field usually help guide a lot of healthcare decisions. This can be based on medical surveillance or study or experiment data. You could be testing out clinical products or testing out if an intervention should be implemented. Also evaluating interventions, identifying biomedical markers in a specific health outcome, or testing behavior and predicting outcomes, as well as testing disparities in a specific community. Some very common roles that you might see when you look for an internship or a job include data analyst, data scientist, bioinformatician, research analyst, research scientist, an epidemiologist, or a biostatistician. In terms of finance careers, very overlapping themes include accounting, machine learning, and database management. And jobs in the sector usually applies a blend of like programming, coding, statistical tests, and usually a lot of finance market knowledge. And this helps organizations, firms, even banks help make data-driven decisions. This is a very high demand sector, and this can be anything from risk assessment to automating trading and advising trading strategies for other folks. Some of the roles you might see are quant or quantitative analysis analyst, risk analyst, algorithmic trading, machine learning specialist. Moving into public administration careers, you have data visualization, so a lot of evaluation and reporting into federal, state, and local agencies. You also have data wrangling, cleaning, as well as managing different state and federal data. So usually it uses a lot of data analysis and data visualization, and this pipelines into supporting policy, in implementing policy, or even removing policy in different government spaces to make more informed decisions. Some of the positions you may see include data scientists, data analyst, policy analyst. And you'll see a lot of these names are very repetitive because it uses a lot of overlapping skills. Moving into retail data careers, so this focuses more on optimizing a customer experience or pushing for more sales in a specific organization or company, as well as improving retail strategies, logistics, and how they can drive their sales in their company. This involves database management, accounting, data visualization, and data cleaning. And some of the more popular roles that you might see include sports analyst or product analyst, as well as a product data manager, a sales analyst, a data analyst, or a data engineer. And last but not least, we have media data careers, which focus on analyzing audience data. So folks that actually consume the data themselves, and how you can optimize content to increase the audience spending time with the media, and how you can personalize experience. So this also involves your own social media feeds, like how algorithms play a big part in you being more likable towards a specific platform. So this can include data visualization, data cleaning, database management, and a lot of machine learning when you're building an algorithm. Some of the roles you might see are data analyst, applied scientist, data journalist, data storyteller, insights analyst. And this even like also includes, for example, if you use Spotify, you see that you have like daylists and recommended playlists, but this also comes from being a machine learning specialist. So now we wanted to ask all of you folks, what is a data science career that stood out to you either before this presentation and this kind of confirmed that you really liked it, or what's something that you discovered through our discussions and something that you want to pursue? You can let us know in the chat, you could unmute, you could talk to us.
Hello, hello.
Yes.
Oh, so I'm actually also a student with Orca. My professor, Dr. Juan Rojas, we applied to the grant, and I was looking more into opportunities with Orca and across the open science space. And one of the things I didn't know from the flavors of open science was open peer review. That's something interesting that I haven't dived too much into. I've seen open data sets, open problems, but not much of open peer review. So that was a nice insight. And then the FAIR principles as well. That's a an idea that I didn't really think about much of. And that's something that I'm starting to dive a little bit more as I'm also communicating with my school and people interested in open science.
So if you're interested in open peer review, I highly recommend checking out F1000. So their whole system is completely open peer review. So how F1000 works is basically you submit a article, and then you can like suggest sort of reviewers, but at the end of the day, it is open to community review, and they can come in and review it, and they kind of give you their feedback. And there's like the little check mark that'll show up next to your publication to say like, yes, this has been reviewed, and this is what this person said about the review. So F1000 is a pretty neat way to like take a look at how that process works.
Awesome. Thank you for that resource. I'll write that down.
Yeah. Oh yes, and preview is also great. Yep. Thank you so much for putting that one in the chat. So we got a question on data analyst. What would you like to know more about for data analyst?
Are you talking to me?
I think who
Was that
said
a
it?
question? It was more of a statement than a question.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was a statement, not a question.
Okay, because I've got, well, Abuka said data analyst stood out. I'd like to know more about that.
Nope. Okay. She must have, or they must have been before me. Okay, good. I probably put the same thing in there then, but I just put data analyst.
Yeah, no worries.
Ooh, appreciate it.
Padma, I feel like you can kind of speak a little bit, at least to data analyst.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I've kind of hopped around as a data analyst in a, a lot of research and a lot of public administration space, but still in different teams. So I've worked in a public health team, and that has been very research focused and very focused on either like a specific health outcome. So I've worked in LGBTQ health research, and we were looking at how COVID impacted the transgender populations in the US. And my job was to analyze the data that the team collected, and it was very interesting to see a lot of disparities in just how different folks were able to access healthcare and access prevention in healthcare. I've also worked in a neuroscience team, and a lot of those data analysis was just sort of predicting and using regression models. And that was more stats heavy than healthcare focused. But now I also work in state agency data, and that is usually very policy driven. So you're looking at the number of people who are affected by a policy or the kind of policy changes that you need to support the populations that are not receiving enough support from state funding. So I totally like also think that data analyst is such a broad and interesting role and position, and there's so much to explore and do. And I keep finding out different ways that you can serve as a data analyst in different teams. It's been very
Yes.
interesting.
I think Padma, you bring up a really good point that the sort of skills and the tools in sort of, open data, open science, open software. What's great about the fact that they're all open means that, they can be applicable to all sorts of fields and all sorts of questions and all sorts of directions. So like once you've sort of, build up your skills and you in these things that are openly available, you can apply them to all sorts of really neat things.
Yeah, I was also gonna add that at least for me, when I first started or like graduated high school, I never thought I would do something data science related. And I was actually scared of programming, believe it or not. Like this has been such a pivot in my career. And it's been a great one. And I think it was just honestly just a lot of other people motivating me to do it, and people telling me that it's not this big scary thing that people make it seem to be, and it's actually very approachable, and actually really fun. Like I love coding so much that now I'm here running this workshop in Hack Series. Like 4 years ago, I would have been like, that's unbelievable. Or 6 years ago, or 7, 8, I can't do math. A long time ago, I wouldn't have believed it. But I was like, when did I graduate? Well, it's been a while. I'm in
Don't do
denial.
that, because then I'm gonna feel.
But yeah, I like you said, I think it's very transferable. And one thing that I think, if anything, that I've gotten out of like hopping through different teams and roles is that it's so transferable, like you said. And there is always going to be like a little context that you pick up with the position and with whatever team you join. But at the end of the day, it's still the same foundational skills that you bring in. Um, to a team or an organization or a company. Someone asked, for data analysts and researcher public health, what free resources should we be looking into to keep skills sharp, practice, etc.? I have some background in statistical modeling, but would really like to get comfortable. Do you have advice first? And then I can add on.
Sure, yeah. To keep your skills sharp, I mean, some of that will be looking at like publications to see like what the kind of the newest models and tools are being used. Publications are one of the better things to look at, but also, you know, a lot of, especially like academic institutes have like webinar series that are open. A lot of institutes have webinar series that are open in public health. So like going to some of those talks and kind of just hearing what tools are they using, you know, what's the big ticket items that are you know, big tools that are being used that can kind of help you like stay up to date if you've already got like the skills. I'd certainly give different advice if you like didn't have the skills and you want to build those up from the ground. But if you've already got some and you want to stay sharp, then you know, sort of checking out what's happening there. You can also kind of like pop into the tech space, the health tech space, although I will say a lot of that can get a little overhyped. And then you can end up sort of just continuously jumping from thing to thing to thing. So it could be definitely dangerous.
Yeah, I would say like another way to keep it sharp by yourself is just doing a project, and we will be going over how to find data and how to run your own exploration and how to have fun with data that you find online, and really having project experience, I think, builds a lot of flair to your portfolio and a lot of showing off of skills.
All right, so we got a question, is there an upcoming session where these data related careers will be discussed more? No, this is where we talked about them. Like these webinars are meant to be sort of bite-sized bits, and we can, you know, discuss them more on Slack. Actually, do you want to go to the next slide, please? Excellent. So we've created a Slack workspace for us to have a community, and we can chat more about, you know, data science careers or any other questions you have. And as we get to the more hands-on section, you know, if there's code you want to continue to play with and you get stuck, we'll have this Slack channel so we can chat there. And then when we do the hackathon, we'll definitely be using the Slack a lot for that. But yeah, so happy to answer more questions about career stuff right now because we've definitely got time. And if there's things we don't get to, definitely hit us up on Slack and we can continue the conversation, especially as more folks who are like working professionals come in as well. So yeah, we've hit the part of our general Q&A. Does anybody have any other questions about open science, open source, FAIR, any of those things, or any of the upcoming workshops or anything like that? Oh,
Quick
yes.
question.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to just leave you hanging. So I know you have a date, looks like September 8th. Is there any work that we could be doing in the interim to kind of prepare us for that training, as well as I believe someone put in the chat, will the slides be available also?
So the slides will be available, and the recording as well. We're still coming up with like the best weird place to put those things. But the slides and the recordings will be available. When we start getting into the coding, like those coding notebooks will also be publicly available as well. So everything it should be free and open and available. As far as for the programming, it is meant to be for like absolute beginners. So there's nothing that you need to prep. Although if you really feel like kind of playing around a little bit in R, you are free to, what would be a good place to start? I think even just looking at like the primers in R might be handy. You know what? I'm gonna find that link in just a second. All right. Go ahead and ask other questions while I look for a link.
When is the next webinar session? Great question. It is on the slide. It's going to be on September 8th. If you've already signed up,
8th and
and
10th.
you were
Harder.
8th and 10th, yes. Part 1 and 2 for an R programming introduction. If you've already signed up, you do not need to register again. We have your information, but if you've not, then this would be a great time to sign up. It's also, you can find all of our information on our website as well. I will drop the link on chat. Yeah. I love the book that you just dropped, R for Data Science. I think it's a fantastic beginner's resource.
I'm also looking for the more bite-sized bits. This one is adorable because it has a giraffe in it, but also it's a really great primer.
Love animals and tutorials.
I know, it brings me such joy. There is also this whole collection of tutorials in Swirl, and then I'm still trying to find my primers I was looking for. Or maybe they changed the name of them. I think maybe they're recipes now, or were they recipes and then primers?
I remember them as primers.
I think they may have changed to recipes, that's why. Okay, yes, cool. Yoink, there we go. Those were the things I was looking for. All right, excellent. Thank you for your questions so far. Hopefully we've been answering them decently. Any other questions? This time is yours. You have us for 10 more minutes. Otherwise, feel free to go on Slack and chat with each other as well. Honestly, some of you might be able to answer some of these questions better than us. We are certainly not experts in every aspect of what we talked about today.
Yeah, I think Bridget earlier mentioned retail data careers and their interest in supply chain management and how data analytics plays a huge part in consumer behavior. And I'm super interested in that. So we'd love to hear from you too.
I took a cloud computing course and all of our data was on customer churn. And I have to say, I felt like I had no idea what was going on half the time with that data. I am actually originally a bench biologist. I studied RNA and I did biology things, and I definitely also did not originally intend to be in coding or computer sciencey kinds of things at all, and then ended up with a PhD in bioinformatics. So that was also originally not my intended path. But it turns out I needed to know these things for the science I was really passionate about, and I sort of ended up enjoying it more than I thought I would. And now I do coding all the time.
Yeah, I think very coincidentally, people who enjoy programming a lot now started off saying, I don't think that's for me. So if that's you, you're on the right boat. You're on the great book.
You're in good company.
Yes, we have a question,
Yes.
Raymond.
Yeah, sorry to take you back. I looked at my calendar and the 8th is empty. How do you get did they send an email to sign up for the sessions for part 1 and part 2?
Yes, as long as you register either on the QR code on the screen, it's also on our website, we will be sending you the meeting invite.
Okay, the meaning. Okay, that's good. Okay. All right, that's good.
Yes, Courtney. Grace,
Yeah.
you have a question.
Hi, I have a
Hi.
question for Alyssa. So I just graduated college. I graduated with a computer science degree, but my focus is bioinformatics. So when you said that, I kind of like nerded out. But I wanted to know like what you studied or researched. I know it's not really important to the talk, but
No, that's okay. So most of what I did, at least during my PhD, was definitely around RNA, so gene expression, regulation of gene expression, regulation of splicing, and RNA modifications, and how those change during sort of normal brain development versus neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So basically, I was just trying to understand how genes change their expression levels, like how much RNA and what kinds of RNA change, what those RNA species change, and then, like I said, even at the base pair level, like the modifications that potentially happen. And I sort of did the same, I continued that path in my postdoc, where I looked more at RNA modifications and splicing regulation. So looking at sort of how, the isoforms are sort of split up and reassembled, and what regulates those things again during normal sort of development versus disease. But in that case, it was like cancer and like premature aging and things like that. But yeah, sort of in a nutshell, basically all the things that have to do with RNA, because RNA is the coolest molecule and you can't tell me otherwise.
okay, very cool. Thank you. I worked in a 3D chromatin lab for like 2 years. So that yeah, that was my first introduction to bioinformatics, and I was like, okay, I'm staying here. And I stopped all my wet lab work.
That's impressive though. That stuff is hard. So well done.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions about the program or the topics or what's coming up next or anything like that? Thank you so much for coming. See you all
Thank
next
you.
time.
I had signed up but did not get the link.
For the upcoming workshops, we've not sent them out yet. Yeah, we will be sending them out hopefully on Tuesday. Thank you all so much for coming.
Oh, thank you, Alyssa. Thank you, everyone.
Oh,
Um,
Nina.
Thank you. I can give you the times. I don't have that already.
Oh, I think she means for the version control
For
and the
the last two ones.
they're both 4 and 6 4. Let me double check though.
They're gonna be, yeah. They're gonna be September 24th, 4 p.m. and October 10th, 4 p.m. Both are 4 p.m. EST.
I thought I had
Yeah.
that in my head. Thank you.
Yes. Of course.
Anthony, Evelyn, any questions from you all? All right, I think that's a wrap then.
Okay.
Thank you all so much for showing up. See you all hopefully next time. Bye.
Thank you.
I should stop recording for